Hello and welcome. Today we have David Clark, the CTO of Sky News Arabia, with us, who's based in the UAE. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing great. Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much for being on today and obviously making the time because obviously our time zones are very different. And I think it's going to be a little bit eye-opening to hear what's happening on the other side of the world. And, also hearing about, what's happening within your industry at the moment. So how has this, I suppose, current climate and COVID-19 affected, your team, your business and where you guys are today?
Yeah, so look, I've been with Sky News Arabia for 12 months. It's a business that works very much from a central hub. So the idea of remote working is basically non-existent. And that's for two reasons, not because we can't do it, but in terms of the heavy lifting of producing content, there needs to be a lot of bodies within the site creating live content, and we have a lot of on-premise infrastructure to do that. When this came about, the UAE locked down very quickly. We trialed a few areas where we would work with reduced staff and move a lot of our non-essential staff, which is more our administration end of the business, to work remotely. That had never really been trialed before, but it was successful, and we found that not only were we able to use technology quickly, so we signed up for things like Zoom, a lot of software as a service type areas that would help us with some business continuity, but the adaptation was really quick. I think we spent a week mobilizing all of our staff. So that's 70% of our population of about 500. And from there, we spent maybe another week with our IT staff being on site just to make sure that they were supporting everybody. And we've now been working remotely primarily for about 4 weeks now.
Oh, it's fantastic. And with Sky News as a group, was there some sort of uniform protocol that was rolled out, or was it pretty much each into your region to themselves?
Yeah, so Sky News as a brand is different entities. So we're a joint shareholder where we have a local shareholder plus Sky News in the UK, also a primary shareholder. Effectively, we had to adapt for local rules. So our responsibility tended to be our bureaus within the UAE, our main hub in Abu Dhabi. We also have a bureau in Dubai. We responded pretty quickly to looking at what the local regulations were in terms of lockdown. And from there, we centralized that management through our security head, who looked at the risk and assessed daily where our bureaus would have to act, and looking at the risks in terms of what was happening locally from spread of the virus, but also how they would maintain business continuity. So there's about 35 bureaus we have across this region, and then bridging out into UK, Washington, New York. So there's different areas to contend with. I think we're kind of lucky in that most of the bureaus are satellite and remote anyway. So we basically had to look at local rules for each aspect of our business.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge is that it's very difficult for us to run a business remotely when certainly from a broadcasting infrastructure, a lot of it is on premise. Now, a lot of that technology has moved to the cloud, but it's kind of a long life cycle or a long project cycle to move that to be a lot more remote working. We've been fortunate enough that we've been, I guess, beyond experimenting, but moving to proof of concepts to move video content around via the cloud, edit from a browser, and have staff work as well as they would from the main site from other bureaus and remotely. Leading up into that, where we did lock things down, that meant that a lot of our digital process was able to be maintained. And in fact, being a news organisation, there's huge growth in digital consumption of news. And we've actually been able to maintain that and actually grow significantly the amount of content just using cloud-based tools, IP-based contribution. In fact, our first week of lockdown, we had 100% growth in the amount of contribution of content, live content over IP, using things like Zoom to go to air. We would run from about 5,000 minutes a month we ran to 9,500 minutes of contribution of Zoom or IP-based video content. So the challenge is there in that we weren't using a lot of this technology, but the adaptation, the initiative, and I think some of the innovative thinking of a lot of the staff has been fantastic. I like to think of it as this has been an opportunity. I know I've seen the memes of, who was in charge of your transformation activity. And a lot of it comes back to COVID. I think that's an opportunity. From there, transformation is really hard. It's how you can maintain it from here on in. I think if you're like me, where we've been able to adopt and use this as an opportunity, for me, it's how do we actually make it grow from here, and how do we make the new normal really work for us?
And I suppose that really leads on to the next question. Where you guys are in a growth in terms of consumer content. People are pretty much online all the time to the news to figure out what's going on. But from what you've put in place now, and you've had to adapt really quickly, as you mentioned, what do you think? 6 months from now, let's just say COVID's disappeared. What do you think is going to stay, and what do you think is going to go in terms of the way of working right now?
I think, I don't think we will continue to work remotely. I think a lot of our staff benefit from being part of a big group and being on site. You get a lot out of that face-to-face. I think what it has enabled us is to really change the thinking process. So where we would have used a lot of infrastructure to produce content or even just maintain our data flow, because effectively we move a lot of data around on a regular basis. And that would have been on-premise, co-located type setups. I think there's now a real belief that we can move to a lighter touch where we can maintain the security of our data. We can move it into cloud or service-based architectures and run it like that successfully, not just because it's a buzz to try and do it that way, but it does enable us. For us going into growth, we have a lot of staff around the world that, if they can get access to the same infrastructure we have in our head office, could actually do a lot more with contributing to the business. And I think that's probably one thing that will ultimately stay.
Fantastic. That's great. And in terms of your team, so IT has been heavily impacted in terms of being really responsible for pushing the adaptability of the business in the situation. Remote working relies heavily on IT. And if it doesn't work, it's really IT's. It sounds terrible, but it's really IT's problem, isn't it? Because, you've got to make it work. But have you found, your team's adaptability to pretty much being, BAU to, okay, guys, it's go time. This is what we're doing. How did you find your team through that process?
I've got to be honest, I've had to pinch myself because we were not working remotely and not really enabling this process to happen. But I'm a numbers guy. I like to look at data. I like to look at, how we're reacting and moving from a data perspective, and the numbers look good. On average, we're looking at about 80, 90 cases per week to our IT team. 50 or 60 of those are for remote workers. and that average is maintained pretty much solidly over the last 3-4 weeks. It was a case of I was wondering what I was missing. So in my weekly management this week, put it out to the rest of the exec team. Hey, look, things will look good by the numbers, but I want to put it out there. You know, how do you think we're performing? How is your team working remotely? What is and isn't working? And the only response I really got back was there were a few folks that were working off an old laptop that really, if we could replace them, could we do it sooner rather than later? And I think, you know, in this region, in fact, pretty much the rest of the world is suffering from lack of the right spec laptop or machine. You know, manufacturing slowed down, distribution slowed down. But if that's the only problem I have, you know, fingers crossed that's the way it maintains now for as long as this goes on. And the fact that the team would respond quickly, that they're happy to help their colleagues through all of this. It's not just from, you know, rapid change in work environment and anticipate that they're going to get some grumblings on this doesn't work or this should be better. We've actually not suffered. The adaptation has been fantastic. And look, I hope that continues. And, you know, I promote my IT team to continue to reach out, even if, you know, they're on a call with Zoom and somebody has an issue, just reach out proactively. Even myself, you know, we'll do some tests with microphones on a laptop with, you know, a head of legal or whatever, just to keep things going. It works in both ways. In technical capability, that's helped us really maintain people being happy to work remotely and the fact that the technology works. But I think it's the human touch there of the tech teams reaching out and working through issues just keeps people, you know, happy with what they're doing in the current environment.
That's good. And if you could offer one tip to, you know, any other IT leader going through the same situation right now, and whether this goes on for the next 3 months, I mean, what have you learned from this process that you can pass on as a piece of advice?
I think when it comes to architecture, there's a lot of talk about business continuity and disaster recovery, security of data and the rest of it. I think if you can maintain a focus that is always looking at security of your data and business continuity, and you architect in the way that it doesn't matter where your staff are accessing applications or data, they are secure in doing it, then always go for that option. Because I think if you get into a situation like this, it's not even a case of flicking a switch. It's actually just moving that person's device to wherever they need to be working, making sure they've got the right communication tools and just keeping things going.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. And like I said, also with the different time zone, that was fantastic to you know, catch up with you and meet with you. What we'll do is obviously, hopefully chat to you in the next couple of months again and see where you're at. And hopefully the lockdown's finished. It'll be interesting to see. And I think what the interesting piece about the circle back around is going to be seeing, you know, what goes back to normal, what changes, what stays, you know, what goes and for how long. I think that's going to be interesting to see. I know from my business, I think remote working, we had half remote working, but we had our Asian team were office based. And for me, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, it's a decision I'm going to need to make as to whether that goes back into an office or whether they stay remote working, because there's some benefit and costs there, you know, from a, you know, physical office perspective as well. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens the next few months, but we'll definitely circle back around.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.